A retired Supreme Court justice is calling for the repeal of the Second Amendment. In the New York Times, 97-year-old John Paul Stevens says he wants to weaken the NRA's ability to block constructive gun control laws. Stevens also says the March for Our Lives shows support for new legislation. That includes increasing the minimum age to buy firearms and prohibiting civilian ownership of semi-automatic weapons. Christopher Bedford, the editor-in-chief at the Daily Caller, joins me now with more analysis. Chris, we saw hundreds of thousands of Americans come out, talk about the issue of gun control this weekend. Do you think Americans would ever, though, go as far as supporting a repeal to the Second Amendment?
No, I don't think they would. And I think that if Republicans actually picked up this issue and stopped being afraid, by the way, they were terrified. One of the reasons they passed this spending bill as quickly as they did is because no one, conservatives or liberals, wanted their boss to be in Washington, D.C. when this march came into town. They're ready to book it out, and they sold out a lot of things. It's only part of the reason. If Republicans made they're trying to take your guns an issue in this election, they may have an actual chance at getting the GOP voters and the GOP base as juiced up as the Democrats already are by Donald Trump. Now, and Justice John Paul Stevens here, he's reiterating a point he's largely made for years. In his book in 2014, he said that the Second Amendment should be refined to be just people in a militia. He wrote that opinion basically in his leading the dissent in the Heller case. And Catholics may remember him as someone who also wrote the majority opinion in the ending of silent prayer allowed in schools.
And so obviously, like you said, this is going to continue to be a big issue as we move into the midterm elections. Let me switch gears, though, because I want to talk about the proposed addition to the citizenship question in the 2020 census that Mark Irons had reported on. And he had mentioned that the California Attorney General, as well as many other attorneys general, are going to sue the Trump administration over its decisions. Do you think what they're saying about how the citizenship question will endanger immigrants is real, is plausible?
Well, no. Nothing in the census will endanger anyone. It's just a series of questions that are asked. But they've got a real voter strategy here. They're calling it insidious to try and ask people what their immigration status is. But what they're really trying to do is juice up the numbers of the state and count people who aren't in the country legally as members of that state. Because then the census is used to decide how many congressmen a state gets, how many California will get, how many Arizona will get, Texas get, Massachusetts. And also then to decide electoral votes for that state. But Congress, Democratic representation in Congress is more important to them. And they're afraid that if legal immigrants don't fill out that census out of fear, that they'll lose congressmen, and it's probably true.
So it's all about the votes for many of them, isn't it? Many Americans don't, I want to switch gears also, because many Americans don't want their tax dollars to go to funding Planned Parenthood. As Jason Calvi was reporting on, the spending bill allows for its funding, though. Do you think pro-life lawmakers are scared to act because of the midterm elections?
I can't imagine why they're so afraid to act. This spending bill was such a disaster for anyone who's got any kind of conservative or pro-life ideas. The Republicans didn't just bribe Democrats with a bridge here or a stadium there the old-fashioned way. They funded pet projects. They gave $500 million to Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood says they're not spending it on abortion, but we saw when Republicans for a moment tried to take that money away a few years ago, all the advocates for Planned Parenthood were saying you're attacking women's access to abortion. They showed their true colors. Republicans were unable to stand for that because they were offered the crack pipe of military spending, and they all just passed it around, and they passed restrictions on ICE, restrictions on immigration enforcement, restrictions on border protections, and gave $500 million to Planned Parenthood, money to sanctuary cities. It was a betrayal, and pro-life voters should remember that.
What do you think this says about the lobbying power of Planned Parenthood and how effective they can be?
It's amazing, but I think like a lot of us thought, that the Republicans had already weathered that storm. No matter what they voted on, they're going to be attacked in campaign advertisements by the Planned Parenthood lobby. But everything that we've seen in survey after survey has shown that, well, America has grown more liberal on issues such as marriage. They've grown more conservative on issues such as abortion. Mm-hmm. And as science has gone on and been able to show what's going on in the woman's body and when a child can feel pain, we've learned more, and our attitudes have started to change much more in line with the churches.
So many important issues here, especially as we approach midterm elections. Christopher Bedford, the editor-in-chief at the Daily Caller, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.